Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to another video. Today's topic is how to monitor today's geopolitical hotspots and observe the news hours before you hear about it in the local media. In other words, you can tune around on the local broadcast frequencies, you can monitor utilities, military and aero comms, you can go on to the Twitterverse and see images and see postings from people who are on the scene. You can know what's going on hours before you hear about it on the BBC or CNN or other news media. So I'm going to go into my notes. Let's go into VimWiki and take a look at a few notes I've made for this presentation. We'll call this Tuning the Global Hotspots. Slogan of the day is, the BBC said it this afternoon, I heard it this morning. How to do this is, first, watch the Twitterverse. That's easy. Develop and curate your own lists of reliable people close to the events. Use a broadsheet to look at several Twitter feeds at once, instead of pulling up individual feeds one by one. To help out with that, there's a very great application called TwitGrid. I made a fork of it myself, which is a bit better than the original in my humble opinion. It helps you pull up batches of Twitter feeds grouped according to topic. Here's the URL. Go there, clone it, use the script, and it works great. Of course, be aware of propaganda and bullshit. You need to pay attention when the tone or tempo of the propaganda changes, or when the tone or tempo of the media postings changes. People do have a sixth sense that tells them when things are changing for the better or for the worse. When you are tuning around the radio spectrum, observing broadcasts and observing utilities and other players, get to know the normal activity. Be aware of who is on. Be aware of when frequencies are normally busy and when they're normally quiet. And when things should be busy and everyone's gone, beware. But don't get suspicious all the time when people disappear. Sometimes it's just a normal flow. In the middle of the night, for example, those mini pirate boats, Chinese fishermen in the South China Sea, they don't really transmit that much. But during the daytime, in the afternoon, they're chattering all over the place, and it's normal. When they're busy or quiet at the wrong times, if there are stations that appear that are not normal, if you see ADS-B traffic, which is not normal, for example, if government officials seem to be scattering away from the capital, take note, listen to the local broadcasters. Now, a lot of this involves languages other than English. Some things I can understand a bit of. A lot of it goes over my head, but I can get help with translation from people who are experts. You should do the same. Get some help translating. Make recordings. Play the recordings for people who speak the language, and they'll tell you what it means. Listen to the local broadcasters, because the local press may report SHTF first. If stations disappear, beware. If stations are being taken over, the programming changes, suddenly there's a different kind of voice on there, beware. That kind of stuff does happen. So let's go and look at some radio servers. We'll start with Ukraine. There are not a whole lot of SDR sites in Ukraine. Most of them seem to be plagued with a lot of power line noise and other electrical interference. But there are a couple of them which do manage to pull in some decent signals. Let's go to this first one, located in Sokriani, northwest Ukraine. they have a good signal-to-noise ratio on all bands. The broadcast band is pretty decent. Let's try 603 kilohertz and see what's going on. Hey, KiwiSDR people. Fix your servers, man. Join the 21st century and go. Secure sockets layers, SSL. This non-HTTPS stuff is really a pain. And it's not secure. Do you think we really want people snooping into our traffic and knowing that I'm listening to a stream from your sites? Join the 21st century. You can do it. Okay, the rant's over. Here is a broadcast station on 603 in Ukraine. If you speak the language, if you're from there, if you have family or friends from there, this may be a familiar thing. Maybe not quite as good as a trip back home, but there it is. Listen to the programming, listen to the flow and the tempo. If it changes, if they drop this and suddenly it sounds like they're running bulletins, beware. Let's try another broadcaster. 1494 kilohertz. .94 is not coming in very strong. There is a carrier. There's another station on 1485. That one's not very strong either. But you can see there are some other signals in the broadcast band. It's not completely empty when you listen from northwest Ukraine. I'm going the wrong way here. There we go. I've got the synchronous detector on because it receives a bit better under noisy conditions. But it's complete hell when you're off frequency. So there's a look at the broadcast band in Ukraine. There are also some other signals that may be of interest. There are utility stations, military and aeronautical, and a few players that come up sending encoded, or should I say encrypted, number and letter groups on CW. So they're in there. The codes probably can't be cracked if the crypto people are competent using one-time pads and such stuff, but they're in there. And in fact, there is a community of people on the internet who monitor numbers, stations, both voice and CW types. This particular single sideband station seems to be off the air, and there is a hellaciously strong digital signal putting out some hash just above that frequency. Okay, let's get rid of that. Move over here. Radar on 5448 kilohertz. These are generally used for watching bodies of water, tracking large ship movements, or observing weather phenomena. The radar seems to be off right now, but there is a single sideband station, which appears to be an aeronautical volmet station giving weather reports. So these are things to take note of when things are calm, when there's nothing extremely important happening, or at least when operations are at a slow tempo. There is a station in central Ukraine which also receives okay. They have more noise. The medium wave reception is okay. I've managed to get the station on 648 kilohertz pretty well. Notice that I do tend to hover here for a bit on these URLs. If you want to tune this station, pause the video, copy this URL and plug it into your browser, and you will go to the same one that you are seeing open up right now on the right side of the screen. UR5VAB is a station located in central Ukraine. Now I'm taking notice that there seem to be some gaps in coverage. That station at 648 kilohertz is coming in. Not so well. It's got some stronger stations dropping some interference on them. Could be a bit better. There is someone stronger here on 630. I'll go to the envelope detector while I zero things up and then go back to synchronous demodulation. The station is playing a bit of music. There's a bit of talk in there too. So listen to these things and pay attention. If they're being interrupted by bulletins, if you hear something that sounds like the Ukrainian equivalent of get out, get out, get out, well, you know SHTF has happened. All right. Let's continue to a different site. Vinnytsia is in northwestern Ukraine. I believe this one receives pretty well in the HF range. Let's try 5.5 megs, 5.152 USB upper sideband. It looks like a pretty place. Well, not much. There's that digital station. Notice that it's not as strong over here. The waterfall is adjusted differently. But in fact, it does seem to be closer to the background noise. Not quite as strong as from that first KiwiSDR that we were listening to in northwestern Ukraine. Let's try 603 kilohertz again. Okay, so there's a bit of programming. It's noisy. We're going to change our geographical area and look at a few locations in Asia. First on the list is India. Currently, it's the middle of the night in India. We should have some nice propagation on the AM broadcast band, or medium wave as I sometimes call it. All India radio is on 819 kilohertz. We'll try Kolkata for our first listening attempt. Similar to the other stations we've been listening to in Ukraine, there is a lot of electrical noise plaguing these receivers. There are people alive today who don't know what it is to listen around on HF or medium wave and not hear all of this noise. They would be amazed to know what it sounded like about 20 or 30 years ago, before all of the electronics and before people stopped caring about clean power distribution across their communities. This is insane. So All India Radio is not coming in so well there. There is a possibility that the station is off the air for the night or down on low power. Secure connection is not available. I may have to go into the forums and pester the KiwiSDR developers and say, hey, you've done all of these great things with these radios and these servers. The last thing is to make these secure. It's easy to get certificates from Let's Encrypt for these sites. And it would be a great service to improve the security for those of us who visit and listen on these things. Especially since there's so much JavaScript, so much code that runs in these browser windows. Okay, now back to radio. All India Radio is in there, but it's very weak, and there's noise all over the place. Not so good. If you want to know what the HF frequencies sound like from over there, let's try 6,000 kilohertz. Not bad. That slanting line on the screen is a sweeper that's going across the spectrum, taking measurements of the ionosphere. These are broadcasters in 49-meter band. A lot of military and transport traffic operates in the 6.5 megahertz range. So there's 6577, a popular aeronautical frequency in the North Atlantic region, and it's used in other parts of the world too. There's generally not much airline traffic around here. That's this location at night that's going to use HF in the Indian Ocean region. Doesn't seem to have a whole lot of air traffic at night. The North Atlantic, North Pacific seem to be the most busy. So there are a few signals, and there are some radars taking measurements, but not much. If you tune into here one day and you find it's full of single sideband or other signals that are not normally here, that should get your attention. Let's change to a different place. Indonesia. This particular SDR is located near Jakarta. Be aware, my first note, the band 8700 to 9400 kilohertz is full of unlicensed chatter. These are mostly fishing boats. A great many of them are Chinese fishermen, but not all of them. There are people speaking other languages in here, especially near Indonesia. I have heard people speaking Javanese, I think it's called. Not much English, but a lot of chatter in other languages. So let's give 8815 a try. They tend to be busy during the day with the most radio chatter. There's not so much in here at night. Even when the propagation changes and this band goes to long skip or outright closes, the lower frequencies don't seem to have any busy groups of fishermen chattering in the nighttime. There's just a bit of white noise and maybe one station in here. Possibly some HFDL data linking. Not much. All right, so that's Indonesia, and I've said a few words about that. Japan is a pretty interesting place to listen when it comes to geopolitics. here on 819 kilohertz is the DPRK. That's North Korea, and they play music. The sound they make is music to my ears. That's a clever line from a piece of music we'll talk about on a different day, but I bring it up now because that gentle elevator music is stuff that you hear in elevators, airplanes, sinking ships, and in dictatorships. It's created to calm you when you're in jeopardy. You also hear it in dentists' offices. But it's so traumatic, I'm not even going to talk about dental offices. But it's another place where you hear music. All right, we're having a little difficulty pulling up this SDR receiver. Just so that you can see the entire URL here. That's how we program the KiwiSDR to come up with the proper frequency, mode, and filter settings. No luck. Let's try that station from a different site. This one seems to work. On YouTube, there are a few videos of shortwave listeners tuning in 819 kilohertz. Most of them sound pretty bad because they're simply playing on the loudspeaker and holding the microphone up to the loudspeaker. That's acoustically coupled sound, and it's pretty ratty. What you're listening to is something that's fully digitally, electronically coupled. But the signal is noisy, so you're not going to hear much there. I'm going to try this again. I really want to pull it in from this other site because it had better reception. The DPRK is mentioned in this video because they are also one of the big players in the geopolitical shell game going on. It's the DPRK, China, Russia, sometimes Iran, versus the West. There is a question of whether we're going to have a rules-based international order where we all abide by one set of rules and try to get along, or whether we're going to have an order that's based on force, where people take what they want from other countries. The only thing that's going to stop them is force. You're going to have to cut some balls off in order to get folks to behave. So that station in Japan is not working for us right now. Let's go back to this KiwiSDR receiver in the Republic of Korea. How do you say that? Yusonggu Daedong in the ROK? That receiver gets pretty crowded sometimes, so often this interface will come up with reduced features, but it still allows you to receive. You just don't have the nifty bells, whistles, ways to customize your reception, but it works. You can still listen. .621 kilohertz is pretty noisy right now. Let's try some talk radio in South Korea. 882 kilohertz. This is less noisy and more intelligible. I am going to make a comment, though it is a bit screwy. There's this station that we're trying to listen to. There is also another station with a broader bandwidth and similar strength. 873 kilohertz. Who is this? I don't know who that is. Ostensibly, they have a higher fidelity signal,
Which of the following
but the
is true?
fidelity is not worth
A,
much when
the
there's
main
noise
engine is not
and
working.
interference from other
B,
stations.
something has hit them. C, they are not sure what the noise is. Listen carefully.
And it's the same game that I've been talking about.
This is Omega 1.
If you know the
The
language,
ship's main engine
tune
has
these
been
stations in
repaired.
and listen to the reports.
Roger, Omega.
Listen
Glad
to the
hear
general ebb
We
and
really
flow
appreciate
of the
help from
programming,
everyone in mission control.
and
that. Our pleasure, Omega.
pay attention if things
We would
change.
just like to run a final
If they're
test.
dropping their normal programming for
Did you
bulletins
hear
or
that noise?
special
Roger,
reports.
Omega. We heard something.
Okay, one more SDR to show you. This one's located in the Philippines. Our first station to listen to is DYHB Radio Mindanao. Okay, there is a mistake in the URL. Let's fix that. That looks like a pretty place too. Here's the complete URL if you want to tune in and listen to off-the-air audio for this Radio Mindanao station. They're on 747 kilohertz. I'm going to bring this window back over.
Simple lang ang engine text sa akong kilala, Rodalom, sa niya, si Gob Lacson.
Notice the difference between the medium wave broadcast band in the Philippines and in Ukraine. Philippines is full of stations. Look at these. Lots of stations. A good number of these are pretty strong. Other ones are in the noise. But there are stations, lots of stations. That means there's free flow of information. There's commercial activity. People are listening. People are not running for cover and hiding in bomb shelters. Frequency 5574 is an aeronautical frequency. It's Singapore radio. Oh, it's that same problem. When I saved that URL, I saved it as a SSL protected URL, which is not correct. Frequency 5574 is aeronautical. It covers traffic over the South China Sea and even areas to the east of the Philippines. And in fact, northeast of the Philippines into the Western Pacific Ocean. The waterfall colors need some serious adjustment, so observe as I change that green into a darker blue. Singapore and Manila don't seem to be too busy right now. There's a lot of HFDL traffic. Perhaps a bit of voice. This may be a Volnet broadcast, but it's rather noisy. During the daytime, this spectrum gets a few unlicensed operators, so-called fishermen, pirate radio operators, if you want to call them that, because they're running and they're unlicensed. But it's nowhere near as busy as that range above 8.7 up to 9.4 megs. Let's take a look up there right now, listening from the Philippines. You can see there already is a bit of traffic. Let's find out what's going on. 8743 kilohertz. There's a weak station in there. Okay, that does not appear to be one of the unlicensed stops. That seems to be some legit aero traffic. Here's another one. So there's this and plenty more during the daytime in this range. This signal over to the right appears to be HFDL, HF data link. And this is something else, possibly a radar. I'm not totally sure. There also seem to be digital data bursts of a different nature, which I don't quite understand, that operate up here. This could be one of them. There's another burst, a burst, another burst. I think we're slowly moving toward a time when there's less and less voice communication down here on HF, and there's more and more of this digital stuff. So enjoy listening to voices while you can. The state of the art is moving toward plugging equipment into a radio and looking at a display and not listening to what's going on. Okay, so that's a basic rundown of some broadcast stations and a few utilities, aeronautical and unlicensed activity. The military operates throughout the HF spectrum. You've heard the United States with the EAM activity on a few global HF communications frequencies. Aside from them, there's the usual movement of aircraft on the oceanic routes that you can listen to on HF. As far as operational things, when it comes to battle time, well, those take place on microwave, satellite links, frequency hopping VHF radios and stuff that's incredibly difficult to listen to. The days of simply tuning in a group of infantry soldiers is pretty much gone. But this is interesting stuff on HF. There are satellites on UHF, or the upper VHF range, 250, 270 megahertz, plus or minus a bit, that do carry some voice links in the clear and a lot of encrypted communications that just sound like static. Every now and then they'll go into the clear and you can actually hear human voices. So things are different than they were even a few years ago. I'm going to turn this off here, go quiet, and say that concludes the video. If you're interested in any of the URLs for these software-defined radio servers on the internet, pay attention to the URLs that you see. Pause the video, copy the URL down, and then you can listen. Or you can develop your own list. Let's go back on the internet for a moment. I'm going to show you a map. Let's get rid of the notes. Don't need those anymore. This place has a fantastic global map of KiwiSDR radios that are currently on the internet that you can tune and listen to. You can see there are quite a lot of them in the US, quite a lot in Europe. South America has a lot. 2, count them, 2 in Africa. And there are a few in Asia. Let's go a little deeper and look at Asia for a closer look. Russia, it's got some. There are actually a couple of them in South Korea, or at least the last time I checked. Take a look here as I zoom in. There are 2. I think they're operated by the same person. And obviously they're physically located close to each other. And these flags are pretty well on the same spot. We were listening to one of them earlier. It's operated by a ham. His call sign is HL3AMO. He runs them both in Daejeon, Republic of Korea. There are these other ones in Japan. I complain that a lot of them have low signal-to-noise ratios. Signals are not that strong or clean on them, but there are a couple of them that are pretty good. Coming down here, there actually are some in Taiwan. Let's see if I can bring up the URL. BM2 KVV. KVV also operates that one. And someone down south in Kaohsiung operates another one. Signal to noise 10 dB on that one. SNR 4 dB. SNR 17 dB. If you're going to listen from Taiwan, listen to that one that's up north. That looks like the Taipei area. There's a great big mountain to the northeast of Taipei. Maybe this guy has gone up onto the mountain and put up an antenna for his KiwiSDR. That would be pretty cool. So the spectrum looks pretty good from over there. There's the 31 meter broadcast band. 49 meter broadcast. What's here? Is this the amateur band? I can't imagine those being amateur signals. Okay. The 41 meter broadcast band on shortwave. So, there you go. Let's try regular AM. This one receives pretty well. You could say that I saved the most interesting stuff for last here, because this station receives really nicely, and they are located in what is absolutely going to be a hot spot sometime in the near future. All of the geopolitical rhetoric is pointing toward these people being invaded, forcibly taken over by a government they did not elect, and that government who takes them over pretty well, thumbing its nose and daring the rest of the world to do anything about it. As I said, we are not dealing with a rules-based international order that these folks want. They want a muscle and force-based order. You get your way if you have the guns. Right now, this is transmitting from some free turf. Not free as in beer, but free as in freedom. The sun's coming up in this area. Take a look at that. The sun is coming up in this area. Hong Kong just had sunrise. It's still dark, or perhaps dusky in these areas. So yeah, there are a few KiwiSDRs which are operating inside the PRC. Signal to noise 19 on this one. Can probably receive pretty well. If you want to receive strong local signals from the Fire Drake shortwave jammer, we have listened to a couple of these stations. Here's one down in southern India, Bengaluru, and this other one up north, New Delhi. What's the story? There's one over here in Kolkata which is not on right now. So you can go across this map and find signals and receive those signals in places that are of interest to you. This looks like Kuwait here. Is that Kuwait? I think that's Kuwait. My gosh, what do we have here? 3 SDRs? Kuwait Amateur Radio Society radio number 2, number 1, number 4. Way in the back, I think there's yet another. Okay, so it is 4. 4 SDR receivers in Kuwait City. 15 dB. 8 dB, not very good. 9 dB, not good. So 14 and 15 dB. They need better antennas and possibly some noise mitigation over there. So you can listen to things happening in the Middle East. There's Ukraine. We were listening to these earlier. And what do we have down here? That's Greece. So there you go. If you want to listen to anything in Africa, you're shit out of luck because there are only 2. There's one in Namibia with an SNR of 11 dB, and there's one operated by the Trans World Radio people with a 12 dB SNR. I expect these to improve, and over time we should see more of those coming up. There is a bit of an economic surge in the making in sub-Saharan Africa. You can tell that's happening when you get your own Amazon AWS region and when you start to see these appearing. So we're in the early stages of development down there where people can put up SDR receivers and connect them to the net. South America. The sun's going down over here. Brazil is mostly in the darkness in the early evening. There are lots of stations. 23 dB SNR, that's pretty good. 10, not so good. 14. If I was going to listen in Brazil, I would say go for that one. 23 dB. Let's bring it up. Let's find out what's cooking. You know, a lot of shortwave listeners enjoy listening to the Brazilian music on Radio Amazonia. I have forgotten the frequency, possibly 11780, maybe. Probably something else. My memory is not so good on those frequencies. But if you go onto one of these KiwiSDRs and listen around a bit, you can hear some interesting stuff. Brazil is currently struggling with the virus, as is India. So that's going to be in the content of the broadcast that you will listen to down here on the broadcast band and medium wave. Notice here the broadcast band is really full of signals. This site here, operated by PY2PE and PW5W, is working very nicely. Very good. Look at that. The band is chock full of good signals. They are above the noise. If you can speak Portuguese or you like Brazilian music, hell man, you can just come down here and pick what you want. It's great. So that's it. I've pretty much covered everything I wanted to talk about and show you. I hope this helps. Tune around, become aware, enjoy your day. See you again in another video.